Okay, everyone, we'll give another minute or two to let Eugenie get set up here. But our final presentation for today, actually, the conference, will be Miss Eugenie Tiu from Osaka University. Thank you very much. She'll be discussing an overview of the current state of international branch campuses in Singapore and Japan. So thank you very much, Eugenie.
I'm currently a second-year master's student in Osaka University, and this presentation is an attempt to answer one out of five research questions that I have for my master's thesis. So just to give you a little bit of background, the concept of internationalization actually evolved because of globalization. And according to Knight 2004, internationalization is a process of integrating the international and intercultural into the teaching and learning, into the delivery of post-secondary education. There are two streams of internationalization. One is at home and the other is abroad. At home is any internationalization process that happens within the institution or within the country, and abroad is any internationalization process that happens across borders. And so usually IAB is linked with CBE, cross-border education, and according again to Knight 2011, there are three generations of cross-border education. The first generation, which has existed for many years, is an example of that is student and faculty mobility. And the second generation would be transnational education. And although she did not mention the word transnational education, she described the second generation as the movement of programs and providers across borders, which is transnational education, as most researchers would agree. And the third generation, which is now common in Asia, are education hubs. Okay, and a little bit more background. According to SEAPTE, or Cross-Border Education Research Team database, there are currently 232 international branch campuses in the world. Largest exporters coming from US, UK, and Russia, and largest importers from UAE, China, and Singapore. And the purpose of this presentation is to actually trace the historical developments of IDCs in Japan and Singapore in order to identify the peculiarities of Japan's internationalization efforts. And I will be using SEAPTE's definition of IDC basically because I'm getting some of my data from their database. So the definition is an IDC is an entity that's owned, at least in part, by a foreign education provider. So let's begin with Japan. This paper is Ninomiya et al. They wrote a paper called The Past, Present, and Future Internationalization of Japan. And they divided the internationalization into three phases. The very first phase is 1945 to 1951. Now, what's important in this phase is that this is post-war Japan. And so during this time, Japan was doing the first generation of CBE, which is student and faculty mobility. They're trying to send students to the US, and at the same time, they're trying to develop scholarships and ODAs at this time because they wanted to reconstruct their image as a pre-war militaristic country which invaded Asian countries. So that's what's important in that phase. And the second phase, the red one, which is what I'm going to be mostly talking about, is the start of the development of branch campuses in Japan. So in the 1980s to 2000, there are three important events that happened. The first one is the 100,000 plan by Prime Minister Nakasone. The second one is the establishment of Temple University in Tokyo. And the third one is the establishment of other international branch campuses in Japan. And in 1991, there are around 36 international branch campuses that existed in Japan. And there are actually 6 reasons why IDCs chose to establish in Japan. There are 2 perspectives. The first one is the Japan side perspective and the foreign side perspective. Now, for Japan, they wanted some IDCs because there was an increasing demand in higher education, but there is a supply shortage. So they thought that maybe, international branch campuses can fill this gap. The second one, for Japanese students, they were thinking that, if I study in an international branch campus here, it's cheaper than going abroad. And the third one, it's effective in attracting the younger generation. So at that time, the population in the local municipalities, they were shrinking. So the leaders in the local municipalities, they were thinking that, what if we invite international branch campuses in here so that we keep the number of students in our area? So that's the Japan side perspective. Now the foreign side perspective, I can basically sum that up into one reason, which is economic reasons. In 1970s, we remember the economic boom of Japan, where the Japanese Japanese gadgets were dominating the world. And so in 1980s was the economic bubble of Japan. And so that attracted a lot of American investors to invest in Japan and move away from the crisis at that time. And so they wanted to invest a lot of money in Japan. So yeah, for the foreign perspective, they saw higher education as a promising export, and they wanted to expand international markets and make a profit. So economic reasons. So according to Umakoshi, if you want to put up a branch campus in Japan at that time, 1980s to 2000, the U.S.-Japan Committee for Promotion, Trade and Expansion, CPTE, this committee was responsible for inviting and facilitating all the necessary things before IDC can be put up in Japan. The local municipality, they are all required to provide these for an IDC. So they have to provide for a public land availability for free or for leasing. They have to provide, the local municipality is the one responsible for the construction of the buildings and facilities. The local municipality is responsible for giving they should provide the IDC with scholarships, loans, financial support, host family, student exchange internships, and all of these should be included. Unfortunately, not all American universities were interested. Unfortunately, not all not all the local municipalities were able to meet these requirements, and as a result, all of the IDCs that established, around 31, actually most of them closed in just a matter of 5 years. And some of them are even prominent universities. Some of them are prominent and some of them are not well known. So you can see, for example, the first one is from 1987 to 1993, so in about 6 years they closed. Tokyo American Community College, 1988 to 1993, 5 years, and so on. But actually, Texas A&M University is one of the universities with good reputation, but they also closed down. But there was actually one study that stated that it's not, later I will say, because I'll cite first why they failed. So their IDCs failed basically because high tuition fees compared to local universities, not well-known schools, students' levels of English is insufficient, culture of US universities was not compatible with Japanese beliefs and customs, and at that time, foreign campuses in Japan are not formally recognized under the Japanese university system, and graduates at that time are not regarded as graduates in Japan. And there's another reason. So the economic bubble was around 1980s, but the economic bubble burst happened in 1991. So maybe at that time, the people were still feeling the pinch of the economic crisis or the economic recession. So that's why there were few enrollments at that time. And this, the story of Tamu Texas A&M universities. There was a case study done by, I forgot his name, but there was a case study that was done. And actually, the reason why this campus closed is not because of economic reasons, but because of political disputes. Before you can put up a branch campus, you have to get the signature of the national government and the prefectural government. And when they got the signature of the national government, the prefectural government wasn't very keen to sign the agreement to make a facility for this branch campus. So what happened was, when it was established, they were using a temporary building. It wasn't building with consent. It was a temporary. So that's the story of this university. Next one. So the current number of IDCs now is actually 7, not 4. And SEAPTE actually just recorded 1, 2, 3, and I emailed them and asked why 2, 3, and 4 are not, and 5, why these universities are not here. Basically, they haven't checked the next website, so that's, but I think there's still 1 to 7 is the IDCs in Japan. And Japan is also actually exporting their own university in China. Yeah, so that's. And in the last phase of the development in Japan from 2000 and onwards, yeah, lots of new projects like the 300,000 project. They plan to recruit 300,000 by 2020, I think. And one of the important things that happened was the revision of the school education law in 2003, where there were, before you can put up a national university, and before a university can open a department, the rules were so strict. But in this revision, they made the requirements a bit lighter, and some of the 2 more reforms that they included was incorporation of national universities. They grant autonomy to most national universities. And the second one is the system of designation of Japanese branches of foreign universities. So benefits that did not exist before include, and I got this from Lakeland College's website, the authority to sponsor the visa for foreign students. I think it was 2006 when IDCs were starting to accommodate or sponsor visas for international students. The second is students' eligibility to get discounts on commute passes. And the third one is Japanese universities can now accept credits earned at the branch campus if the students decide to transfer to a Japanese university. Now let's go to Singapore. There was a study done by Olds, 2007, and he also divided the historical developments in Singapore into 3 phases. The first one, in the first phase, what's important there was that Singapore saw that education is a very important tool for their economic development. In the second phase, an important thing that happened here was the I-21 policy. In the I-21 policy, Singapore wanted to invest in their manufacturing and service sector industry, and so they launched that policy. And in that policy, they realized that, oh, we need students who are creative and we need students with entrepreneurial minds. So the I-21 policy led to the creation of the E-21 policy. The E-21 is actually education reform policy. And that, the Olds did not mention the contents of that policy, but that policy led to the creation of the world-class university policy, which happened in 1995 to 2005. The I-21, E-21, and WCU, that happened in 1985 to 1995. So what is the world-class university policy? It's actually a program or policy that aims to invite 10 foreign providers in Singapore. And actually Singapore, for foreign providers, Singapore is an attractive location because there are 7,000 multinational corporations there, and there are 1,000 small and medium enterprises there. And so there are reasons why foreign providers wanted to establish presence in Singapore. Large number of transnational corporations, Singapore's political stability, presence of foreign universities, and so on. So when Singapore released the WCU policy, there are a total of 19 joint graduate programs with national universities in Singapore. So national universities have partnerships, and they do joint degrees with prominent universities in the US and Europe and Australia. And from 1998 or from 2000, these were the international branch campuses that established there and are still existing right now, except for the University of New South Wales, which failed, unfortunately. And it's the first ones were followed by these ones. Now there are a total of 15, and Singapore is exporting its education itself to Malaysia and Uzbekistan. Although the Malaysia one is tentative, it's still in the developing. Singapore has its own exporting will. So according to Olds, when government, it's also important for a government not only to develop policies but also statecraft, to have the ability to implement projects effectively. And Singapore's Economic Development Board, actually when they released the WCU policy, they did not just say policy, IDCs welcome to Singapore. They also courted these IDCs by giving them financial incentives. For example, a French university, I think in SEAPTE, received $10 million in research. University of Chicago Graduate School of Business received several $1 million as well. So this, I think, a lot of the schools that were established are also business, entrepreneurial. That's basically because of the I-21. And actually, the first 5 years of WCU received, first 5 universities, first 5 IDCs of WCU received several $1 million of direct and indirect subsidies. So that's pretty attractive for an incentive. But Singapore has also some shares of your failures. There are 3 universities and even more that failed, basically because of low student enrollments and financial disagreements. Disagreement tuition fee increase, failure to be financially dependent. Not all the universities that, not all IDCs established there still receive financial grants. I think Singapore has priority where they put the incentives. So to discuss, this is near the end, I shared 5 points today. IBC in Japan started in 1980s to mid-1990s. IBCs in Singapore started in 1990s or 2000s. Japan, the motivation for starting is the economic boom. Foreign providers were attracted because of the economic bubble. But in Singapore, foreign providers were attracted basically because Singapore has the WCU policy, and at the same time, it's a great location. Number 3, reason for failures. For Japan, strict requirements of the CPTE, economic recession, and language barriers. But for Singapore, low student enrollments and financial disagreements. For Japan, the incentives, there wasn't any incentives except for the policies being relaxed in 2004. And for Singapore, incentives for financial support, great locations, a lot of multinational corporations, and language, English. And last one, current numbers of IDCs in Japan, 7, and Singapore, 15. So what I noticed here is that there's a difference between who initiated the establishment of IDCs. In Japan, there wasn't any policies that were launched, unlike the world-class university policy, and there wasn't any incentives as well. And the economic bubble attracted foreign providers, but in Singapore, incentives and the world-class policy attracted the providers. So it works in two ways. In Japan, huge part of the initiative was extrinsic, coming from the outside rather than intrinsic. There were still political disputes despite the local municipalities showing interest for IDCs to put up in here. And then for Singapore, initiative was expressed on both sides. There is a WCU policy, and foreign providers think that it's a great location. So to conclude, local and international observers of Japan's development in its internationalization process have criticized the policies being focused on numbers and on attracting foreign students rather than nurturing local students. Although new policies suggest that it will start embracing a more integrative approach, it is hoped that Japan would see the potential contribution of IDCs in complementing an aspect of its internationalization process. Thank you.